Now that we've seen the 2025 schedule for the Aggies, what are realistic expectations as we just enter the offseason?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. On today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the Aggies' most recent commit, and that is tight end from Auburn, Mike Riley. We'll break him down. What are we getting in a player? What are we getting in Riley? I think he's a good player. We'll talk about him. We're going to talk about realistically, how many wide receivers does Texas A&M need to go get in the portal? We've talked about how much you need to target that position, but we haven't really discussed seriously, how many guys do you need in the wide receiver room? But we're going to start the show talking a little bit about expectations moving forward now that we know the 2025 schedule. And, this is the reason I want to have this conversation. We talked about the schedule yesterday, and the reason I think it's a fun conversation to have is because, this is a tough schedule. Someone in the comments yesterday said something along the lines of asking hey, do you really think LSU is going to be a tough game? We beat them this year and the same record and all that. There's point being, there's a lot of conversations to be had about within this conversation. But, the first thing, I think Mike Elko is in a tough spot here. And the reason he's in a tough spot is this 2025 schedule is much more difficult than the 2024 schedule. And you're expected to do better because it's year two. It's why I said yesterday on the show, man, I bet if Coach Elko had a crystal ball, he would say, please flip these schedules. Obviously he wants to put good product out on the field in year one, and he wants to have a good year in year one. And I believe that he did that for the most part. Obviously the season ended a little bit in a frustrating way. You would have liked to have won a few more games. And, there's a lot to unpack there, but at the same time, I think for the most part, it was a positive season, but the schedule set up for it to be a positive season. We kind of figured it would be a positive year. You know what I mean? I think that was kind of the vibe. Looking at this schedule, looking at the way it broke down for the 2024 season, you kind of figured the Aggies were going to at least win 8 games. And of course they did, and they had an opportunity to win more than that. So the expectations for 2025, and this is where the issue comes from for Coach Elko. The expectations are going to be higher with a tougher schedule. So the first thing he's got to do is do a great job in the transfer portal. If he is able to do a good job in the transfer portal, if he is able to lock down some elite talent and really make this roster better, I think Coach Elko is putting this team in a position to succeed. I think that it's hard to argue against that. I think that that's going to be a big key. I would say one thing that'll be interesting, and I actually just had a good idea, a light bulb moment here on the show, and this will probably be Monday's show, I'll tell you that right now, but it's going to be looking back at every single player Coach Elko brought in the portal for this season, giving them a grade and then giving an overall grade for how he did picking up talent in the transfer portal. And the reason that you'd want to look back on that is because that is a massive part of the future of this program. You have to find ways to be able to go get elite players in the portal to make your roster better. There's multiple ways you can do that. You can go get players in the portal that you're getting to upgrade a position. Maybe you're going to get depth. Maybe you're going to get young guys with upside. Whatever you're trying to get in the portal. And I'll obviously, when I talk about that on Monday, I will have that be kind of a thought of okay, this guy wasn't brought in to be a starter. I think he kind of did what he was brought in to do. So that'll be a fun conversation that we will have on the show on Monday. But what I'm saying is, right now, Aggie fans, I bet if I asked you your all's expectations for next season, you would tell me 9-3, or you would tell me 10-2. Expectations are always high. Over the last forever, it feels like they haven't been delivered on. And so now I think it's time to start delivering on some of these expectations. Now, the issue here, as I talked about yesterday, is this schedule. It's going to be a really, really, really tough one. You look at this, you play road games at LSU, at Notre Dame, at Missouri, at Texas. I mean, now, someone made a great point. And, like a genuinely great point yesterday in the comments. Let's go see who said this. We'll give them a shout out. Someone said, hey, the schedule, knowing that there's a lot of teams on here. So here, let's read this right here. It's not a name. It says DT1064. It says the schedule doesn't seem too hard. They don't have to play Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, or Ole Miss. It could be a lot worse. They should fill one of the bye weeks with the Big Ten team. So love that comment there. I really thoroughly enjoyed that comment because it's true. I mean, I'm griping about these games being on the road, but you're not playing Georgia or Bama or Ole Miss or Tennessee. Literally the teams that were in the conversation for the playoff in the SEC. I mean, LSU wasn't in the conversation. Texas is obviously in the playoff. Missouri wasn't in the conversation. Notre Dame's in the playoff. But you get what I'm saying. So, yeah, I think that's actually a really solid point from the that commenter there. So the expectations for me, I mean, this is tough because I don't want y'all to yell at me and say, well, that's not right. But I mean, looking at this schedule, I think 8-4 is very realistic. I think that is probably like kind of what you're staring down. I mean, once again, you have to be perfect at home against Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, South Carolina. 3 of those 4 teams, obviously not Mississippi State, but the other 3 teams are all, I think, going to be really good next year. I think really high upsides there. So there's a realistic chance you could drop one of those. And then you're going to be underdogs at Notre Dame, at LSU, at Missouri, at Texas. So, I mean, you'd have to win a couple that you aren't supposed to, what I'm saying, to overachieve, which is the case every year, unless you're the best team in college football, which right now Texas A&M is not that. So, to make a playoff, to do something special, as I like to say here on the show, you're always going to have to kind of overachieve. You're always going to have to do something you weren't expected to do, win a game you weren't supposed to, and then win the games you were supposed to. And obviously, Texas A&M, you were supposed to beat Auburn, you didn't. You were supposed to beat South Carolina at the time, you didn't. Obviously, South Carolina ended up being a darn good team. So, Texas A&M dropped those 2 games. They win those 2 games, they're in the playoff. That's just the reality. They couldn't get it done. So you have to win the games you're supposed to and win a couple you aren't. And you could argue that obviously I think the Aggies were favorites against LSU and I'm pretty sure against Missouri, right? But still, point is you're playing really good teams at home, So that is what's going to happen next year. So people are going to be angry at me, but I mean, I think that 9-3. I think that 9-3. If you want to have high expectations, I think it'd be 9-3. Yes, obviously the Aggies could win 10 games. It could happen. Marcel Reed could turn into a Heisman candidate. They could win 10 games. But I think right now, looking at the schedule, unless the coaching staff absolutely hammers the transfer portal out of the ballpark, which to this point they're kind of on the way to doing that. They've got some crystal balls for some really good players. They landed the tight end and Mike O'Reilly, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, that I think is a really darn good player. You brought in your backup quarterback that's going to help your team out a lot. I think they've done a solid job so far, but there is a long, long way to go when it comes to being successful in the transfer portal. So let me know in the YouTube comments, ladies and gentlemen, what are right now, obviously, reasonable expectations? Let's say Coach Elko does a good job in the portal, puts together a good roster. What are y'all's expectations for next season now that the schedule is out, knowing what we kind of know about the players on your roster, knowing what we know about your coaching staff? What are realistic expectations? Let me know that in the YouTube comments. We're now going to talk a little bit about the wide receiver position. It's been a hot button topic here on Locked On Aggies this week. But the way I want to talk about now is how many realistic guys do you want to bring in, knowing what you've lost, what you're going to have in the future there. We're going to talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to talk about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go buy tickets for whatever event you might be going to, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's to go see a comedian, whether it's a Broadway play, whether it's a concert. The only place anyone should buy tickets to these set events is on Game Time. It's the only place I used to buy tickets. My family and friends used to buy tickets because I've pushed them on everybody so hard because they're so great. I promise you, you will not regret using Game Time. It's easy to use. They have the best prices. I love the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So the wide receiver position is going to be an interesting one for this Texas A&M team. So, I mean, in the portal so far, you've already lost Bostic, Tease, and then Allen. So you've lost 3 players, 2 of which in Allen and Tease, you obviously Micah Tease. What happened to Micah Tease is going to be really interesting because I really thought he was going to have a big role for this team this season. I thought he was going to have a breakout season. I thought he was going to have a really good year, and that just never panned out. I was really disappointed with what this season looked like for Micah Tease. I was fully expecting a big year from him, and it just never really panned out. So a little frustrated about that without question. But this is what happens. You get players, sometimes they don't pan out. You got to go find the next big thing. And I think the Aggies are looking for that in the portal. And so we've talked about the players thereafter. We talked about that these last couple of days. We know the players that this coaching staff is after in the portal at the wide receiver position. The question is, how many are they going to take? And I mean, to me, you got Jerome Miles coming in, the 5-star. You got Terry Bussey back. And I have a feeling it's going to be really interesting knowing that Terry Bussey is going to be like an every down player next year. Does he take on a Travis Hunter role, or is he just going to play receiver? And, that's going to be an off-season question for Coach Elko. And I don't know if he's fully decided yet. I'm sure that he's still scanning the portal and deciding the best role to use, his probably best weapon on this team. So that's going to be a really interesting aspect here, is knowing, okay, are they going to find a way to use him as a receiver for sure? I'd like them to. I mean, he looks good out there. He looks good. And yes, I believe he'd be a great corner as well, no question. But I just think there's a lot you can do with Terry Bussey as a weapon anywhere, running back, receiver. I don't care where you put him, he can shine. So knowing that, to make me feel better with what you've lost and what you're going to have in the young guy in Miles, and we obviously still assume you're going to have Noah Thomas back unless he decides to leave or he decides to go to the NFL, which I don't think he's going to do. Unless that happens, I think you realistically need, I'd say you need 3 solid portal receivers. I mean, because you're going to have Bussey and Thomas, and you're going to have Jerome Miles. Those are the guys that we feel good about. Obviously, you'll return some other players, but not that I care about as much as those 2 names. And then the young guy Miles, who I think Jerome Miles is going to be a legit walk in and play type of receiver. So I think the number that you have to go get is probably 3. You could talk me into 4. Now, the problem is we have to remember this, ladies and gentlemen, and this is part of looking at college football. You only have so much NIL money. And I talked about how, last go round, the Aggies missed on that Keandre Lambert-Smith kid who ended up going to Auburn and being really good. And I really hate that we missed on him because I think he was one of the best receivers in the portal. Missing on him hurt Texas A&M. You got to be willing to spend a little bit of NIL money on some of these receivers, or in general, you got to be willing to spend some serious NIL money on positions of need. So I think that they've got to be willing to spend a good chunk of NIL money on this wide receiver room going forward. Now, I think you'd be fine if you went and got two, let's play this game. Let's say that you got Casey Concepcion, Micah Hudson, Noah Thomas, Terry Bussey, and Jerome Miles all in your receiver room next year. And then you probably would go get maybe one or two smaller name receivers, young guys trying to make a name for themselves, kind of like a Jacob Bostic and a player like that came in. Just you didn't expect him to play much, but you never know, upside type of play. Like get a couple guys like that with that core that I named. You feel really good about the Texas A&M wide receiver room moving forward. So I think that is how I would handle the wide receiver room if I was the coaching staff. I would go get that many guys. So that's going to be interesting. And I mean, Noah Thomas is going to be one of your guys. I believe Jerome Miles can come in and play snaps. Obviously, if you go get two of Hudson and Concepcion, Miles, I think that's going to cut into his snaps, but he's going to be a true freshman. I mean, you don't anticipate him playing a lot unless he comes in and he just fully takes over and he's the guy and there's no debate and he proves you can't not have me on the field. So I think that is a way to look at this, is to kind of take a step back and go, you know what, I think the coaching staff needs to go get this many guys. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do with this room, because I kind of think it's going to make or break the way this next season goes. That's how desperately you need receivers. If you don't get good receivers, I just have a feeling that the Aggies are going to be in trouble. You've got to hammer this position. So I'm going to be really interested to see what happens with this room. But as y'all know, it's going to be a big part of the offseason for this team. So let me know in the YouTube comments, ladies and gentlemen, how many receivers do you want the coaching staff to go get? Do you want them to go get 2, 3, 4? What's the number that would make you feel better about next season? How many wide receivers do the Aggies need to go get in the portal? Let me know that in the YouTube comments. I got a cold, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, a little stuffed up here. It's just my ibuprofen, so I'm hoping that'll help a little bit. But we're going to talk a little bit about the Aggies' new tight end, Mike O'Reilly, kid from Auburn. Tell you why I think it's a great addition, coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. A lot of fun stuff to bet on this weekend. We're getting close to the holiday, ladies and gentlemen. You got some more NFL football. There's a ton. The NBA is getting back in action. You got a lot of fun stuff to bet on. So once again, head on over to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch or make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and, of course, the Locked On Podcast Network. So the Aggies land former Auburn tight end Micah Riley. Mike O'Reilly is a player, and one of my favorite attributes of a tight end, okay? And I tell you this, of a transfer portal player, not a tight end. One of my favorite attributes of a transfer portal player is when the school that lost them is upset about losing them. So Riley was a 4-star. He was the 402nd best player in the 2022 class. And, I think looking at Mike O'Reilly, and I heard on the Auburn side of things, they were upset about losing this kid. Now, he was behind Rivaldo Fairweather, obviously. So he's been there. He was a sophomore. He caught 3 passes in his career, 2 touchdowns. I find that to be very funny. So, hey, he's a touchdown machine. This year, he had 1 reception for 3 yards, and it was a touchdown. Who did that touchdown come against? Came against New Mexico. So, interestingly enough, he's a touchdown machine. I'm just kidding. But obviously, you can see where the upside is there with Mike O'Reilly. And like I said, the Auburn side, he didn't play a lot because he was behind Rivaldo Fairweather, who was one of the better pass-catching tight ends in the SEC this year. So Mike O'Reilly, I think that Auburn kind of looked at him as part of the future. And that's why people were upset that he left. They're like, oh, man, because I know that Auburn's tight end room was really old, and kind of Mike O'Reilly was the young guy who they expected to kind of take over. And him leaving kind of put them in a spot where they go, oh, man, what do we do now? We got to go hit the portal now. So the Auburn side of things was upset to lose this kid. And obviously Texas A&M's already lost Platt, which I hate. I hate that too. Like, whoever lands Platt, they'll be able to say, hey, the Locked On Aggies host was upset that Platt left. I like the upside of Jaden Platt. I thought he was going to have a really good career at Texas A&M, but I get why he's leaving. Makes sense to me. But, Texas A&M had a lot of tight ends on roster. Coach Elko hammered the tight end position in the portal last year, and it just never really amounted to much. And whether that was, hey, did Colin Klein kind of change the way he does things, or was it Texas A&M just didn't have the tight ends they needed to be successful? I think there's lots of different things it could have been, but at the end of the day, it was something. So looking at that, knowing that, I kind of think that Mike O'Reilly hopefully is an answer that's an actual answer. 6'5", 266 pounds, big tight end, but he can catch passes. So that's the way I'm looking at this is can he be the answer, or is he going to be just another name in this room? I don't want another name in this room. I want a player who can come in and genuinely help make this roster better. So I'm really hoping that that's who Mike O'Reilly is. I think there's a chance that's who he is. Once again, I know that the Auburn side of this was really upset that he left, and they thought that he was going to be a good player, and they liked the upside there. So Auburn's upset that he's gone, and they thought he might be the future. So maybe he is the answer at tight end for Texas A&M. But he's the type of player, he hasn't put up a ton of career numbers, so I bet it wasn't a crazy kind of NIL thing, to where I think this is the perfect type of addition. A guy with upside that hasn't fully been proven to where you're going to spend $800,000 on a tight end in the transfer portal. I think this is the perfect addition at a position Texas A&M needed to upgrade at. So I'm very, very excited about Mike O'Reilly joining the Aggies. Fired up about him. That's going to do it for today's episode and this week here at Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here every single day. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast platform, leave 5-star review, all that good stuff. Subscribe there as well. Helps the show, helps me out a lot. Really appreciate y'all being here every single day. Hope everyone has a great, great weekend. And we will see y'all on Monday right here on Locked On Aggies.